It's the state of the dungeon. It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hello friends, I am Rob and this is my State of the Dungeon address. This is for the game that took place on the 15th of September in the year 2022. The game was Anime Campaign, the last day of our two-parter for Anime Campaign. All players were present with the exception of the player of Billy Bubba, who unfortunately is back to school and will not be at the table very often, so we miss him. A certain amount of levity. Now at this point all the characters ended up getting their epithets revealed, so I can now tell you what they are. First of all, we have Glenda, the not topic worker. She had her epithet of copy, which allowed her to copy cats and copy herself with me, myself, and I, so lots of fun stuff. She could also copy one other person's epithet, which was kind of cool. We also had Mel, who was possessed of the epithet of grief, and her epithet allowed her to screw with people, changing their moods, and also creating little thunderclouds to go over people's heads. So, Billy Bubba's epithet was commemorate, which was tough, but that's why all of his abilities were based on parties and celebrations and such. So, it was a little convoluted, but it worked out. We had Bob, just Bob. Bob's epithet was ball, so he was able to summon balls, and hitting him was like hitting a rubber ball. Things would bounce off. We had Dick, the old man who sold musical instruments. His epithet was harbor, so he protected other people. It could also become the harbor master, which is kind of like a big superhero power boost. We had Tim, the author, whose epithet was biography, which allowed him to throw books at people and also to take on the role of famous people of history for a little bit, borrowing their powers and expertise. And finally we had Klaus, who was the mall Santa. His epithet was premature, which allowed him to jump in front of other people's activities. He also could throw snowballs because it's never too early for Christmas. So the group had been taking down gangs of collectible card thieves in the mall in Townsville, and the Townsville PD collectible card division asked them to help fight the gangs because they were overwhelmed by all these gangs suddenly popping up at the mall and causing trouble. So the group had one more group to take out. The Townsville PD was just about straight to the limit, so they were asked to go in and save the mall. There was a epithet battle taking place between the leaders of two gangs. They first took on some minions. It was clear the two gangs were hockey-themed and baseball-themed. And at first they just fought 4 of each side of the minions, who all teamed up together to go after the interlopers. It wasn't much of a fight. Honestly, having these epithets gives them considerable power, and several of them have group attacks, so they were able to blast the opposition with multiple barrages of tidal waves that they were able to summon, floods of cats, and we had actually some clever play from Klaus, who actually tipped over some shelves on top of some of the goons, which trapped them. And then those shells were smashed to splinters by the cannon fire from Bob, who can fire a cannon ball. Yeah, it works. And they beat these goons pretty well. But the problem was, the fear was that the entire place was going to be shaken to pieces because one of the epithet users had an epithet that involved shaking the ground violently and possibly doing structural damage. So the group went to the mezzanine level, the upper level, and there they saw 2 gals who were fighting and throwing off epithets left and right. One was using dazzling light displays and sparkle blasts. The other one was causing tremors. So the group went after them pretty hardcore. Also, each had 3 henchmen who were kind of watching and cheering on their team. Well, the girls were still fighting each other, and they got to see what their powers were. They figured out Quake was Val Tremor's epithet, and they went after her first because, of course, she was the big concern. The fight was memorable in all of these cases because of hilarious mischance. In some cases, though, I was very proud. Some of the players really had warmed up to the idea of being able to call your shots and helping to set the scene and interplay with objects in the scene that they rationed must be there. For example, obviously there would be a sign overhanging in this store, which was a Lacey's, takeoff of Macy's, and Klaus took a knife and he chopped the supports on the sign and had it swing and slam into Val, which knocked her out of the fight with Casey to stop her from using her some of her powers, which could have been pretty damaging. And of course, he didn't roll well enough to stop it from coming back and smacking him. So there was a lot of comedy of errors type moves in here. But I was really happy to see the player of Klaus step up like that. He did a pretty good job there. And there was a couple of people who also looked at what was available and tried to set the scene and use things to their advantage, which was great. On the other hand, it also identified an opportunity. Some of the players really kind of need to work on elaborating their abilities. If you're playing in a game like this, and you aren't fired up about, detailing how cool your character is, or sometimes reveling in how pitiful your character is. Just saying, oh, I'm just going to do this. It's not fun, it's not exciting, and it really makes these games drag. So having a group that's up and pepped and ready to go is really important for these games, but I'll talk about the game itself after. Eventually, both Val and Casey, the baseball gal, they eventually didn't guess, but her power was glitter, and she had a sparkle bomb which she threw, which it affected most everybody. Some of the group were really using their epithets to try to forestall disaster, especially Klaus, whose premature one would allow him to act before the intended target was doing their thing, and it almost made him seem like he was acting continuously throughout the battle sometimes. But, that's how his power was. Santa was not happy with this. At any rate, Tim got knocked down the broken escalator after the goons tackled him. They didn't roll very well, so they fell down with him. This led to a humorous moment where he took a damaged hockey stick, Tim did, took on the aspect of Bruce Lee and just slapped them around with the hockey stick, which worked out really well for him. Ultimately, Casey was the one in the end who lasted longer. Valerie got taken down really hard, but Casey at bat, yeah, whatever. She got smashed into the gun display and came up using guns until she was convinced by Dick that she didn't really want to use guns. And she's like, yeah, I'm an epithet user. Why would I use stupid guns? Which helped because they were doing 6 damage at a crack. So the group worked pretty well together, layering some of their abilities. Of course, the ones were kind of working against them, but also the successes with disadvantages were causing some difficulties at clutch moments. But at the same time, the dice were relatively fair. The players got off their abilities more often than not. There were some very good successes with extra effects. And again, in a game like this, where calling your shot is pretty useful, if you don't elaborate, if you don't put into your description of what you're going to do the possibility of great success, a game like this kind of falls on its face. But, continuing on. So the heroes beat both of the epithet users and their minions. The police crashed in on the scene. And the Townsville PD captain in charge of collectible card crime, came up and told them that they had discovered who was to blame. They found one of the cards that the gang leaders were all given, challenging them to prove they were the best Monster Zoo collectors. And they and their gangs were fighting because of this prompt, which would promise them rich rewards if they were the best. The person who promised the rewards was Mr. Big, a notorious baddie, who happened to have a warehouse on the edge of town, which was the direction of these cards to go to. Probably a weakness on the part of the plan that they gave an easily identifiable location of where the villain was, but it worked for this. So the group accepted the suggestion that they go and check it out because, again, the Collectible Card Division PD were all way too busy processing perps and, of course, convalescing because many of them got really badly beaten up. So they went to the warehouse, which was the location of the old gasoline and matches factory. Thereupon, they found the doors were chained shut, and the group set about sneaking into the place. They found out the chains were just for show, which probably made some sense. And when they went into the place, they found guards quite quickly. These guards were not 15-year-olds with a bad gimmick. These were black-clad security guards, and pretty hardcore ones at that. The group immediately started taking them down like this was a tactical drill, attacking using their various abilities, staggering their attacks. Dick used his Harbor Master ability to kind of block the way and give shelter to the people around him, which did really help soak up some of the stamina damage they were going to take from the incoming attacks. But fortunately for them, guns don't kill people in anime campaign, so they proceeded fairly effectively using their group attacks and then individually just beating the opposition pretty savagely. When all of the goons were knocked out, they were immediately surrounded as all the doors opened up and more security goons with guns popped out and told them to surrender. Now, this is a time-honored tradition where the heroes are supposed to surrender when they're surrounded by minions. Dick decided not to, and by narration, he was just beaten unconscious and thrown to Klaus to carry. Gotta honor the tropes. So they were brought into the main manufacturing area, which instead of having gasoline and matches everywhere, instead this place had a large printing press for pumping out counterfeit Monster Zoo collectors cards. And they needed masters of all of them, so they were trying to collect all the rarest cards so they could counterfeit them. And Mr. Big showed up. He was on top of this metal gantry by this office, and he ha-ha'd at them and gave a nice monologue. Mr. Big, of course, big guy, black suit, glasses, and he turned around, told his men to shoot, which would have knocked out the heroes. The heroes preemptively stopped this by, well, some interesting things. Klaus decided he would fight them by turning on the machine and flooding them with all these cards. Unfortunately, got a sleeve caught in, and he went through the machine and got mangled and beat up. Of course, by doing that, he allowed Melanie to have a free action, because her grief basically prospers when other people fail. And this became a common theme, honestly. With all the ones that were rolled, Melanie got to go again and again and again, which was pretty cool for her. But all told, the group kind of struggled a little bit at first until they started using their group abilities again, the ones that can target multiple people, because all of the goons together were a group. So when they attacked with those abilities, like it shoots balls too for the cannonball attack from Bob, the wave attack from Dick, and the copycat ability from Glenda, the goons were already hurting pretty badly, and then it was just a matter of watching their ones really rip them apart, and their losing their ammunition because of the complications of rolling a 6 or 7. It was a comedy of errors. But when it came to actually fighting Mr. Big actually was able to fight back fairly effectively. He was able to create an evil root, which was a vine with thorny branches that would lash out and try to grab people. And when confronted with Klaus, who used his candy cane to vault up, he attacked him by trying to flood him with a stream of money and coins that came out of his sleeves. It turned out his epithet was Treasurer. And turned out they guessed that one. They really wanted to key in on these epithets and get a few extra proficiency points. They worked together to guess his, which was fine. The fight was interesting. Again, one's all over the place. So when Glenda tried to use her copycat ability to copy the evil root, the money is the root of all evil ability, she ended up snaring herself because of her unfamiliarity with that ability. It was just a jumbled, chaotic mess, honestly. But there were some really key moments to it. Melanie did put a thundercloud above Mr. Big, which caused rain, a little zapping electricity. To give credit, the player for Tim, the biography, he really pulled an obscure one on me. He ran underneath Mr. Big on the gantry, and he used his ability to, again, historical reenactment. He became Ray Sullivan, the man who was hit by lightning more than anyone else. Very clever. It drew all of the lightning potential out of the cloud into one big zap that hit Mr. Big for 10 stamina. Even though it carried through and fried him, too, for 5 points, it was still clearly a win. Mr. Big showed he had another ability where he basically dropped the mint, a huge vault, right on top of Klaus, who was pressing him rather hard, which broke the gantry. It did. And, yeah, Mr. Big fell, and then he tried using his, one of the things that Mr. Big had the ability to is, like, nothing sticks to money, and he could just shrug off attacks that were coming at him as his reaction. The group hated that ability. It did end up costing him a fair amount of his stamina for doing it, though. Ultimately, the group just pummeled and pummeled and pummeled and pummeled. Some really good tag team work, but it was a game of farce. There were so many poor rolls, misses, botches, critical fumbles. Also, Klaus found out another fun combination. He had an ability called Calling Your Shot. Again, premature. But he can make a roll, and if it's a success, it's an automatic critical success. If it's a failure, it's an automatic critical failure. He got the critical failure on the money churn, or the going through the printing press, which is hilarious. But it was one of those things that it was a raucous, wild mess. And even today, the day after the actual game, I'm hard-pressed to remember all the details of everything that happened, just because every exchange, every time we went through a full round, there were at least 2 botches that caused just uproar and havoc. The gun-toting goons really weren't all that much of a threat. They did some damage. They seemed to really like targeting Glenda. But because of Dick's Harbor ability, where he protected everybody, reducing the damage of people who were already using pea shooters really made those weapons insignificant. Of somewhat greater significance was that Klaus was knocked out, which was the closest anybody really got to getting hurt. Klaus did get KO'd when he basically had the bank vault drop on him. He fell from a great height. And I think he got laced upside the head with Mr. Big's cufflinks, which was his melee attack, his weapon. But other than that, the group handled business. They were all wiped out on stamina by the end. It was a tough fight to the end, but it was a very rewarding one. And, of course, they retired the characters to adulations from Townsville. The Townsville PD said very nice things about them. They got into the paper. They got a little bit famous. It was very nice. So, what did we learn? Because this is the first time I've ever run Anime Campaign. It's the first time my players have ever played Anime Campaign. What did we learn? This is an incredibly fun game for the right people. It is a game of superpowers, but unpredictable superpowers. Almost guaranteed to not be anything you can imagine from a superhero, because you're at the random chance of a random word generator. You don't know what your powers are going to be until you pick, and then the mechanic of throwing it back to the game master to pick out a selection of powers for you to choose from is pretty wild. It's pretty crazy, but it worked really well. I think my players liked the choices I made for them, the different powers that I came up with using the words they selected. There were several wrong moments, don't get me wrong. Everybody was in kind of a bawdy mood that night, I guess. So there were some moments where I'm just like, oh, come on, there's a young man in the group. We don't need to resort to this childishness. But we had a lot of fun. But, okay, this is my assessment of the game real quick, though. First of all, you need the right group. If you take a group of hardcore tactical D&D players, for instance, they're not going to like this game. There's no tactical to it. You can try to do things that seem to make sense in the moment, but because of the anime nature of the game, consequences don't always work. Your characters don't have hard stats like strength. You know, your only stats are proficiency, which doesn't do anything. Really, it does nothing except determine how close you are to getting another type of superpower or developing your character out a little bit more. You have stamina. That's it. That's the fuel that powers your abilities and your ability to stay upright from taking damage. So it's not going to do well for people who want more crunch. It's also not going to do well for people who like to see their character be a real badass. It's just how it is. Every character has the same chance of success and failure. The game is heavily weighted in favor of success. You only fail a quarter of the time, no matter what you try. So there's no reason to try to be subtle about it and I just do my basic attack. No, do it with style, do it with flair, because you have an excellent chance of being able to succeed because you're in an anime. So if your players don't like to go outside of the box and they like to stay in their I move forward and attack, this isn't going to work very well for those players. You can have a mixed group of people who love the over-the-top nature of the game, and the people who don't and just want to attack, that's all I want to do, they're not going to enjoy that part so much. They may still be able to do cool things. You can try to narrate them into being cool, but this is really a game for participation from the players and the game master working together to tell an interesting story. Without that, don't try this game. If you as the narrator have to provide all the crazy and all the fun, it's not going to be good. So I'll warn you of that right now. And again, people who really like just tactically thinking things, no. This is a game for great ideas that are going to be funny. Sometimes things that are, when you have a character who has a vulnerability and you're confronted with that vulnerability, you don't run away from that vulnerability. You embrace it because it makes for a better story. That's also very important. If your character has a fear, playing up that fear works to develop your character and make the story interesting and more than just tablespoon deep. That's good story building. If you're just having an over-the-top farce, then just embrace the over-the-top farce. Sometimes the dice turn against you. In this game, like I said, 75% chance of succeeding at anything you try, and 10% of that is with a complication, possibly. 20% of that is succeeding better than you would just normally by default succeed, so you could add an extra effect and do it a bit cooler. And that 5% chance of having a critical success and being amazing. You know, hitting a minion and knocking them out of the whole scene, through the roof, out through a wall, whatever. You could do that. This is that kind of game. But it really works well when your players are good at narrating their actions. And that is something my group needs to work on a bit. There's no denying that. It's something that comes with practice. It's something that comes with a lot with desire and enthusiasm too, though. If you really, really, really want to embrace the zaniness of what living in an anime would be like, with all of the ridiculousness of every 10 feet there's fighting going on because it's the anime world. People get into spontaneous fights, and people walk around in schoolgirl uniforms when they're not at school, and that's just how it is. And that's the game in a nutshell, really. The game master just makes decides the powers for the players, sets a scenario, and then just lets it go. I think that's how it works best. You frame a setting loosely. You don't want to put too many details down. You don't want to nail too much. You want to let the players use the playground you give them, including making up the features that they end up using and relying on in the game, and just let them have at it. Yeah, by all means, having memorable villains is great. They will remember Mr. Big for a while, I think. He was a good challenge for them. But, at the same time, we had a lot of fun, and there was, I know, more potential to be tapped with that game to be even more fun if all the players are equally involved and invested in telling a great story. This is a game that we will keep in our back pocket if we ever are missing a lot of players, because making characters is relatively quick, although it is more demanding on the Game Master than almost any other game because you come up with all the powers for the players. But it was a heck of a fun game, and superpower games can be fun anyhow. When you take away all of the grittiness of a lot of superhero games and tracking numbers and statistics, and especially when the numbers can go really high, everything does a set amount of damage. Just do your best and have fun. And it was just a wild ride and there were a couple of times too where I'm just like looking at how they layered their different abilities, and I'm like, wow, okay, everybody's taking this, and they're like, nope, I'm doing this, that'll take care of that, he's doing this, that'll take care of that, and I'm gonna attack before he even does anything and do this. And it was amazing. Crazy? Was it a little tough to navigate? A little. It wasn't my smoothest game, I'll give you that. But the players, I think, really did a good job, with the caveat that I'm not saying it was perfect. They need to really enjoy a game like this, they need to do better at, again, narrating their actions. The number one thing I wish I could help them out with, but it's something that you kind of grow into. So yeah, that was Anime Campaign. Fun game, completely free, by the way. If you want this game, it's download. And again, not a game that you're going to enjoy if you want a tactical game, but this can be a lot of fun for a group who's looking for a bridge game in between something heavier, or just for people who just like having zany fun, and a more regulated, restricted game isn't as much fun for them. This is the game. It's quite crazy and quite fun. So that's my review of our game and of Anime Campaign in general. Thanks for joining me. I am Rob, and I'll see you next time as we begin Part 3 of the Red Star Rising campaign, The Coldest of Blood. Oh yes, it is quite the work. A huge amount of handouts, huge amount of maps and adventure details and stuff. So this one's going to be a long stretch, but I think they're going to have a lot of fun. And you will be right along with us if you continue to watch more State of the Dungeon. Until next time, my friends, thank you and farewell.